It's been a little while. I've been busy touching grass and I've been a bit poorly as well. But I'm back. I'm back now for is Xuan still worth pulling? Or a better question, is Xuan terribly overrated? Because she is still worth pulling. Let's just get that out of the way here. She is still a very worthwhile unit to pull on your account. She is one of the highest rated units on like Pridewin and other rating websites that like class this units, and a lot of people call her a must-pull unit, and I'm calling her an overrated unit. I don't think she's a must-pull at all. She's a really good unit. Let's just be clear there. Let's just get that out of the way. She's a very good unit, but she is not a must-pull unit for any account. People overrate her value. And honestly, I personally think Aventurine is a better unit than she is if you want to like rank the sustain units. Should we go into why? Xuan is the most overrated unit in Star Rail? Yeah, let's do that. Let's go over her kit. So Xuan is a very simple character. Her skill puts down a field. When her field is active, she provides damage resistance to the other characters, which means they take less damage from other units. When they get hit, Xuan instead takes the damage for them. A thing this build also does is provides crit rate to your entire party. If you have it at level 10, which I don't have, it goes up to like 12%, I think. And what it also does is provide one instance of crowd control. This is very important. That it only provides one instance of crowd control. Her ultimate is a big AoE attack that gives Xuan a tick on her like regeneration thing that she does, and her talent means when her ult triggers, she heals the party for a percentage of health. Trying to remember if it does anything else. So no, her thing is she provides damage resistance, she provides one instance of crowd control, she provides crit rate, and she provides a little healing. It's not a lot of healing, she provides a little healing. That is pretty much her kit. Her damage resistance can be really good. It won't keep your team alive indefinitely, but it will keep your team alive for the most part. Xuan is not good against every kind of content in this game. There are certain enemies that she is just terrible with. We can go over those quickly. Now, people will often say Xuan is terrible in Golden Gears by herself because the enemies there do so much damage that when you have a unit that attacks the entire party, she'll just take so much damage and instantly die. Units like, let's find them. Cocolia can happily kill your entire party. Quite happily. Who else? Dot units, people who do dots like Kafka, quite happily kill you with Xuan. Who else we got? It's the big monkey. This monkey, Xuan's number one enemy. She is terrible against this guy. He does so much damage. You get the running theme. Xuan is not excellent against every single enemy type in the game. If there is an enemy that does big AoE damage to your entire party, she's just not a very good preservation unit, because unless you have your Xuan on an insane amount of health, and my Xuan is now on 6k health. I'm getting there. She can just like instantly die if the enemy does enough damage, and that does happen in Golden Gears and Swarm Disaster, which is why people tend to run her alongside another preservation unit like Japard and now Aventurine, which she's really good at because the way her DR works, if you have like a shield up, the DR also applies to that shield, so you'll take less damage on the shield and she'll take the damage. And what happens when she's below half health, she'll do like a yin yang thing and go back to full health. So she has a lot of sustain, and as long as you can get her ult back regularly, She can keep going forever. Her ult does not really heal enough to be like constant healing. Like, it's enough in MOC and in Pulp Fiction, but in like Simulated Universe, it cannot be enough if you're playing like the DLCs. Now let's quickly go over how you build her, just quickly. So for relics, she scales on HP. So I have the two-piece. You want her to go as fast as possible. As fast as possible. There's no real debate when it comes to Xuan compared to Locha and Rune Mei, whether slow is better, because like arguably slow Rune Mei can be better in like Pulp Fiction. There's no debate there. You want Xuan to go as fast as possible because her crowd control is once per field. Once per field. People like blow over her crowd control ability. It's one of the reasons she's incredibly overrated. Like, people were like, oh, Xuan's incredible. She provides a field that gives you crowd control. Once per field that lasts three of her turns. So if your character gets hit by a unit that does regular crowd control, that's gone for the rest of those three rounds of her rounds. Which means if they get hit a second time, they're crowd controlled. Which means you want her field to be popped up like kind of like super regularly, which is why you want her to go as fast as possible so that you get more procs like crowd control. Sure, it's one per party member, but like, trust me, the RNG is not in your favor. It's not actually that good. Like, Aventurine's like 50% effect res feels like a more solid crowd control preventative than Xuan's, because like I said, once you've used Xuan's, if you get RNG to another crowd control, it's not there anymore, where Aventurine's 50% effect res is up 100% of the time as long as you have a shield, and quite regularly you'll have more effect res on your character than that 50%, which means you resist pretty much nearly everything in the game except for like stuff with really high effect hit rate. Which is why Aventurine's better for crowd control than Xuan is. Like, people trying to sell the crowd control ability of hers is not really a big deal. It's good to have, but like, don't sell it on the crowd control. It's actually against certain enemies not actually that good. If an enemy does crowd control every single action they take, it's terrible actually, and you're better off having a unit with cleanse. Another big thing that people sell Xuan on is her ability to give crit rate, which is great. Not having to build crit rate on your units is great, except, tell me guys, are you really not building your characters with a 1-to-2 crit ratio? Are you not? Are you not building them with a 1-to-2 crit ratio? Like, everybody builds their characters to a 1-to-2 crit ratio. So, unless you have poorly built characters, or characters with really low crit rate, like my Argenti here has slightly lower than desired crit rate, so I'll often pair him with Xuan, because that 10% crit rate increase makes a difference, because he's practically on like 55 or whatever crit rate when he's got his stack. So putting him up to like 60% crit rate is really, really good. But if you're building your characters correctly, your DPS units correctly, with your 1-to-2 crit ratio, that 10-12% crit rate increase is not actually that big a deal. Sure, you'll crit more regularly, but if you're building your characters correctly, it doesn't really make that big of a difference DPS wise once you get above the 50 to 60% crit rate. Like, there's certain units that certainly want more or would feel better with more, like ratio or whatever, but like a lot of the DPSs get a lot of crit rate in the stats through like traces or whatever, making it so that extra 10% crit rate you get from Xuan doesn't actually feel that substantial, especially if you're building your characters correctly. It's great like early game when you haven't got fully built out characters, or if you're stuck on like the 50% crit rate and you need that extra 10% crit rate. But ultimately, if your characters are built correctly, that crit rate increase is not really going to make a big difference to your like DPS outcome at the end of the day. You're still going to be critting most of the time, with or without it. If your characters are built correctly, it sure can feel better sometimes. But like, there's a 1 to 2 crit ratio for like damage stuff for a reason. It's kind of why like Adventuring's crit damage increase isn't really a big deal, because if you have your characters built correctly with the big crit damage rate, the damage kind of topples off after a certain rate. You can only build so much like crit on a character before you have to invest in other stats. Like my Argenti here, while he has a decent crit ratio, he's kind of suffering on the attack. So if I wanted to buff my Argenti, I wouldn't be focusing on the crit ratio. I'll be focusing on trying to increase his attack or damage percentage. In which case, like Xuan's crit ratio doesn't really mean much. I mean, it means more on Argenti, but on like any other unit where I have a healthy crit ratio, it's pretty much useless. It's just okay, nice to have, but like, it's not like something to bicker up about. If you're building your characters correctly, it doesn't matter. It's an okay thing to have, but just okay. And that just leaves it with the damage resistance, which again, like we've said, is fine in MOC or Pulp Fiction, but if you're using Simulated Universe, it can be kind of not that great, and then you have to run her alongside a second sustain, and then you've got 2 sustains in the party. That said, if you are struggling with the DLC of Simulated Universe, then it's worth picking her up to run alongside your other sustained units, because that DR, when it's applied to like shields, will get you through the game, and she applies like enough healing to get you through. There's like some when you play her in the Simulated Universe, you arguably want to have her on a kind of different build. Like I have her on like a defense chest here, because you do want to build defense on her even though she's a HP scaler. But you could swap this for an outgoing healing boost chest instead. So when she does ult, you heal your party a little bit more than her ult usually would, because it doesn't heal that much. And then in that case, especially, this is only really for Golden Gears. You don't need this in Memory of Chaos or Pulp Fiction. Like, she heals enough, she sustains enough, she's fine. But in Golden Gears or Swarm Disaster, having her on an outgoing healing boost and an ER rope, because the recommended build for her is a HP rope, because she doesn't need to ult. Like, ulting's fine, but in like the DLCs, ulting regularly is really important. You want her an ER rope and a healing chest to keep you sustained. That means your HP takes a big hit. You kind of want her on as much HP as possible and roughly 2k defense, because you've got to remember the way defense works in this game. It gives kind of DR as well. It determines how much damage your unit takes, and that defense calculation is taken into account when it comes to her damage resistance and how much damage she takes when she takes damage for the rest of the party. So you actually want a decent amount of defense on her, so she herself doesn't take as much damage and as much HP as possible. You can like run her on like the night set. Do I have any? This one, the guard set. You can run her on this one to like make her live better, because like the DR on this also applies to her soaking mechanic. But I don't think this is generally recommended. You just want 2-piece speedster and 2-piece HP. Like that's what she wants. She doesn't have really a 4-piece set unless you want to run the guards thing on her. Light code, you just run her to store. This is the one you want. You can run pretty much any light code on her. She doesn't really care. I had her on the Marches one for ages because the extra defense, and he gives like the res to the entire team, which is important. I think this is a really good light cone for her, because like we covered, the crowd control she provides isn't actually that great after you use it. So having more effect res on the rest of your party is really good. I like the March one, but this one I guess is technically better. If you're not running a New Day of My day one of my new life, and you might as well be running her to store, I guess. You can throw Jeopard on her for extra defense. Like I said, defense is really good on her because it gives her more survivability. It's really good. This is great. She is a good unit. It's just, don't let people oversell her, please. She's just good. She's just fine. She's great. She's not as good as a... The thing is, damage prevention is better than damage reduction. Thus, Aventurine is better. People will say, oh, Aventurine's kind of niche. She's only really good in follow-up teams. But that's not true. It's not true. I promise you. He provides enough follow-up attacks in other teams just fine. Just fine. So who is Xuan good for in that regard? I haven't I've been talking down, but she's a good unit. Just to be clear, if you don't have 2 sustain units already, then yes, pick her up. Pick her up. She's really good. If you're having trouble getting through the DLCs, again, she might be a really good pickup for you because running the double sustain, she's really good for. The fact that she has a damaging ult is really nice in Simulated Universe, especially if you're running buffs that increase the amount of an ult's damage. It can be a lot of damage. People downplay how much damage her ult does, but this can be a lot, especially in Simulated Universe. She has crit rate in her traces. You don't actually need to get these because she's not really a big damage dealer. Don't try and build for. There's no point building her for damage. She protects. She does not damage. She is an Aventurine. I also should perhaps talk about her light cone. Her light cone is beautiful. It's probably one of my favourite light cones in the game. And if we look at it, it increases your HP. It gives you energy regeneration, which like I said, you don't need to put her on energy regeneration. She gets her ult back enough. But there are times when you feel like you do need an ER rope against certain enemies because he just takes so much damage from the encounter that you want her on ER rope. And in those instances, this extra ER would be good. And what it also does is provide more healing for your team. So she does turn into a proper defense healing sustain with this. And then you've got a little buff here. Her light cone is really good. It's really niche. It's only really for her because we don't have another HP scaler. But it kind of turns all her it kind of gets rid of all her shortcomings as a unit. It gets rid of the fact that her ult doesn't come back super quick, and in certain instances just feels really bad to the point that you want an ER rope. It gets rid of that. And it turns her into a semi-healer. So, that's really good. It's not a must-pull light cone. This is not a must-pull light cone at all. But it does fill in her shortcomings as a sustain unit and makes her more comfy, especially the DLC on Simulated Universe. I don't think you really need this for MOC or Pure Fiction, honestly, unless you're against the enemies that do a lot of AoE damage, in which case this probably would feel better. But otherwise, she is fine on her to store. Only really think about getting it if you want to make her comfier. But honestly, I don't feel like Xuan is a comfy sustain. She's a good sustain, but she doesn't feel comfy. Not really. I think she's fine. I like her. I picked her up on her first banner, and I mostly use her in the hard content. But do you need her? That's really ultimately up to you. I just want to make it clear that you shouldn't feel pressurized to pull her just because she's out of all the units the most recommended must pull unit in the game. Don't feel like you need to, especially if you're already clearing content fine in MOC and Pure Fiction and all that. The only instance that you might feel like you need her is in the DLC of Simulated Universe for her DR when it comes to those really hard bosses. that do a lot of damage, and then you're going to be running her alongside another preservation unit anyway. If you've already got 2 sustains, then you probably don't need her. And do keep in mind, we probably have a Huahua rerun next patch, because Huahua is due her rerun, and Huahua provides a lot of cleanses, which is arguably better for those crowd control enemies than Xuan is. So if you're wanting to pick up a sustain, do ask, and you've already got Aventurine, ask yourself if Xuan is better for your account or if Huahua is better for your account, because you know Huahua provides that big attack increase and that energy regen, which could be more useful to your account depending on what unit you have. Xuan is fine. I think Xuan is fine if you're struggling on builds, if you're struggling on the DLC of Simulated Universe. Otherwise she's just, you know, fine. Not a must pull though. She's just a good unit. I don't know why she is at like tier 0 on Pride when she should be on tier 1. Not as good as Aventurine. And Aventurine is good for more than just the shields, just to be clear. Like, but yeah. I don't hate people trying to oversell units when it's not necessary. Pick her up if you like her. Pick her up if you feel like you do genuinely need her. But don't feel like you ought to be pressurized into getting her if you're already doing fine. She's just good. And cute. She's good and cute. Yeah, I didn't really do any like showcasing, so we can do that just super quick, I guess. Just to demonstrate what she does very quickly. So ult does big damage. As you can see down here, we have 2 ticks. That means she has 2 health regens, I guess. So it's this enemy here that has lots of crowd control. I don't know if it'll live long enough to demonstrate how her crowd control thing is unreliable. This is quite slow. Argenti might kill it first. Go on, Argenti. You can do it. Almost. She's dead. Not a great demonstration. Did we get anything good? It's okay. Just okay. This is why we use MOC for this stuff. I don't want to go super in depth with her, honestly. She's just, you know, she's just fine. She's good. I'm gonna get shouted at people for not saying she's super good. She is super good. I just think she's overrated, okay? Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Alright. That's enough for me. Good luck on your pulls if you are pulling Xuan or Butil. I hope you get her if you have been saving for her. She is a good girl. She gets you through stuff, and I appreciate that. And I'll see you soon in the next video. Goodbye!